I'm Jason from the Digital Soup Podcast, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual. Check out all the other podcasts at gonnageek.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to episode 93 of Better Podcasting. Today, we encourage you to embrace emerging podcast trends.
In this week's Better Podcasting download, we're back with more SoundCloud. Hopefully the last one for a while.
Sure hope so. And finally, in this week's Better Podback, we get feedback from a variety of sources.
Lauren, start the show now.
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Welcome back to your favorite podcast that is hosted by two guys named Stargate Pioneer and Stephen John Drew. I am Stephen John Drew, and of course, that leaves Stargate Pioneer.
Hey everyone, you can call me SP, and we're just here jamming tonight doing the podcast thing as we normally do, and this is Better Podcasting. This is one of our favorite times of the week, and we have a jam-packed show for you, an information overload show for you, and a subject that we are both passionate about. So I'm ready to get going for this week's show.
Before we get there, though, let's just remind you that one of the things that we like to do is ask you, how have you saved your podcast? Because this is something that we want you to know, that it's okay to make mistakes. You can absolutely make mistakes and then share them. So tell us, how have you saved your podcast? You can go ahead and email us. It's podcast@betterpodcasting.com. You can find us at BetterPod, and you can go to facebook.com/betterpodcasting. And also, we just want to tell you that sometimes in life, there are people who say, Stephen and Stargate Pioneer, you two are amazing individuals, and we want to syndicate your content on our website. So as of last week, you might have noticed that you can find us on multiple places. Not only Gonna Geek, no, you can actually find us on the GFQ network as well. If you are a person over there, you'll see us over there. So just when you thought you have set your filter right to block this ugly mug, audio listeners, I'm pointing to myself, you have to change your filters.
Yeah, and you have to change your filters twice a year because my ugly mug changes between beard and no beard. So it's about that time to start thinking about the bearded SP. Yes, we are on the GFQ network. It is amazing to be syndicated on not only our main network home, but also an additional network. This is the start of us taking over all the network streams.
I'm pretty sure that that's a legal requirement now for starting podcast networks. I think that that's illegal.
It's legal in some state somewhere, maybe some alternate reality. I think maybe. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV or in any dimension anywhere.
All right, let's go ahead and talk the other hot topic. Like I said, it's a hot topic right now, a very current topic. Isn't that right, SP?
We've spoken many times about this one and about how one of the best things that you can do for your show is to get yourself a domain. What's a domain? .com. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. .com, .net, .org, .ca, I guess, maybe, if you want. Yeah, I don't know about that one. But
by the way, I should say, if you're an adult podcast, if you got the money, there's lots of special domains for you out there.
There are indeed. And that is a lot of money to go out. And if you're a hobby podcaster, you don't have that much money to go out. So I encourage you to stick with the .com, .net, or .org. Hey, by the way, we've also discussed how you can use that .whatever domain to build your brand, whether it be simply maximizing your media host offering or running a full-fledged website as well if you want. However, let's be honest for a second. Websites are just one small piece of the puzzle, and in recent years, they have arguably become less important. Yes, that's right. You heard me right. They have arguably become less important. So today we're going to discuss this. Picture this. The year is 1997. The world
No, SP. No.
What? I was just getting into the da-da-da-da-da thing.
No. I got this one covered.
Oh.
So anyways, as you were saying, Stargate Pioneer, picture this. The year is 1997. The world is obsessed with this newfound internet thing. In fact, the US had just seen... Oh, sorry, younger listeners and viewers. Yeah, the internet used to not be a thing. Just so you know, it used to not be around. A lot of us remember it not being around, but some of us more than others. Anyways, as I was saying, the US had just seen a massive increase in homeowners owning computers. In fact, it had skyrocketed from 15% all the way up to 35% over the course of 7 years. So everybody was obsessed with the internet and computers. In fact, lots of businesses decided to start off of the principle that they wanted a .com. They wanted to get their sweet, sweet piece of that .com pie. And so they registered their business, and lots of businesses decided to take this .com model, which, as you can imagine, when your sole motivation for having a business is to get to be an internet business, that doesn't bode well for the .com, and thus the .com bubble collapsed between 2000 and 2002. This was the end of the .com era.
Indeed, it was the end of the .com, and the bubble burst, and a lot of people lost a lot of paper money at that point in time. So basically, why are we mentioning this? Well, the reality is that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses that were really never seen again. I lived through this. I remember all these businesses that I can't remember anymore. And there were many that actually adapted and changed. For example, here are just a few notable companies that made it through. Number one, eBay was founded in 1995. I didn't realize that. Founded in 1995, eBay. And I just bought something off of eBay the other day. Amazon, founded in 1994. And I bought something out of Amazon today, actually. And then Priceline. Yes, Priceline.com. It was founded in 1998. So the fact that there are still some major players that made it through this era of what seemed to be endless bankruptcies is simply amazing, Stephen.
And just to put this in perspective, the .com era sank hard. We talked about how it was 2002 that it really did end. In November of 2000, CNN had posted an article in the early days talking about how in the prior year that basically internet stocks went down $1.7 trillion in the US. That was between March and September of 2000. That's massive. And to see anybody make it out of that shows that if you're going to be in the world of the internet, you got to adapt and change. And that's what these folks did. Now, while some of these folks did see tougher times than others, there is really that common thread that they just embraced it. Now, for example, I'll go to the wonderful Amazon.com citation, since they are everywhere now. You're ordering stuff. You're going and you're telling Alexa, sorry about that for you Echo people. You're telling her to subscribe to all sorts of great shows. Well, guess what? Amazon started as a bookstore. That's right. You were not ordering cereal from Amazon at 2 a.m. And it was only in August of 1998 that they announced that they were going to expand from selling books only. That's how they really embrace change. And look what it did for them. If they would stuck their guns and they're like, you know what? No. It's bookstore only. Can you imagine where they'd be today?
We wouldn't have Blue Origin, that's for sure. Yeah, Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, he owns the space exploration company Blue Origin, and that would simply not exist if it wasn't for the Amazon change back in 1998. So adapting to change is and always has been a key part of surviving on the internet. Here's a callback to you oldies. Yeah, I'm old. I have gray hair in my beard when I grow it out. And I remember website splash screens. Yes, this was before Adobe Flash, splash screens. And there was a time where internet users expected to see splash while you accessed your website.
Yeah, and not only that, but yeah, your kind of accidental saying of flash kind of said what the key was. Is it was expected to be a flash splash screen. Now, can you imagine if you went to a website now, you went to Amazon and you're like, all right, let me sit through this 30-second little promo video that they've got, which is flash-based. No. That's just not going to be the case. And an example of how people had to evolve was that, yeah, this was a thing like you said. And then all of a sudden, the big kicker that got rid of this was back when in 2010, Apple launched the iPad. At the time, the iPhone had been around and they had not been doing Flash. And then everybody thought, okay, well, they're going to do the iPad. You might as well go ahead and include that. And Apple said, no, we're not going to do that. And the iPad took off and people quickly realized that if I want my product, my website to be seen on an iPad, which, had huge market share, I got to get rid of that. And so thus disappeared Flash. And that's another example on adapting with the internet, because really a lot of sites not only had those splash screens, but they switched totally over to Flash, and you got to adapt. Now, that brings us to our key point today, which is how relevant is a website? Websites are great central hubs for your brand. You can have the control. You can be as limited or as inclusive of everybody as you want. You have all of your content there if that's your choice, or you just simply use it as a way to fan people out to all of the other ways that they can find you. You can interact with people on your website or simply link them to where they can interact with you. But ultimately, your time is valuable. So it's important that you allocate your website focus to what is the priority with the current. You don't want to be sitting there spending all of your hard-earned time making a Flash website in the year 2017. No, you want to focus to what's going to serve you the best as a hobby podcaster. And the reality is that the website is becoming much less of a priority for media content.
Yeah, did you know that in May 15th, 2015, Google announced that mobile searches outpaced desktop searches in 10 countries, one of which was the United States. And I'm just guessing that it has even grown since then.
Yeah, that's huge. 2011, you're highly outpacing desktop searches is highly outpacing mobile. Yet in 2015, it's completely flipped and climbed. That's nuts. That shows how people are using the internet in a modern world.
Yeah, and another data point that we can use specifically for podcasting, if you go back to the 2013, 2012 timeframe, Libsyn started releasing podcast consumption data. This is based on the aggregate of all the podcasts that they host. And it was dramatically less mobile consumption of the podcast back in 2012, 2013. But just this last month, in June of 2017, Libsyn data shows that 86.29% of podcasts are consumed on mobile devices. This means that if you are consuming a podcast, it's more than likely going to be on your phone, on a tablet. It used to be on an iPod. I mean, they're still around, but they've been discontinued. So really, it's anything with an OS that can actually download and interact back and forth.
And one really sort of tangent related to this data set is that what do we see people also doing on their mobile devices when they've got them? We see them Instagramming their food. We see them Facebooking about how they just Instagram their food. And then we see people tweeting about how they just walked into a poll as they were Facebooking about themselves Instagramming their food. You see all of this because it's all at their fingertips. And you got to be aware of these trends, because you don't want to be the one that's sitting there and paying attention to somewhere that nobody's coming to. If everybody is trying to find you another method, we want to make sure we pay attention to that. And the mobile stat is huge for a podcaster to know, because then you can extrapolate how you're going to interact with your audience. There's also one study that was on a website called Global Web Index that really outlined also word of mouth still being a top way that people are finding new brands. Now, this is not directly to do with podcasting, but it's an interesting statistic about how the mind works, is that this study showed 33% of internet users polled said they found out about a new brand through word of mouth, which compared to 26% that listed consumer review sites and 24% on social network. So that just shows as well the engagement factor is huge, because the word of mouth is how people are finding new things. Now, podcasting statistics might be a little bit different, but you can kind of follow the common trend or follow the thread to podcasting.
Yeah, and if you want to transition that to the mobile apps, there was a Forbes article that was written in July of 2016 that outlined some interesting signs that said websites were going to become obsolete or were becoming obsolete, and that apps were a big focus. And that was just last year, just 12 months ago. And here's the important part. This is not new. This has been something that has been making headlines for a very long time. For example, about 6 years ago, Australian media guru Jeff Bullis from jeffbullis.com, right, posted an article that outlined Coca-Cola's website traffic was down 40% in just 12 months. And Nabisco's NabiscoWorld.com, I love those cookies. Nabisco. Decreased from decreased from 1.2 million hits per month to just 321,000. That was a 74% drop in just 1 year. And at that time, a study by WebTrend showed that that statistic, or declining traffic, affected 68% of Fortune 100 websites.
And that was 6 years ago. Let's be realistic here. We have become a lot more lazy since then. That's the reality here. And so I bet, I'm going to guess the statistic would probably still be supportive now. But again, that was 6 years ago. So that shows this is not a new issue by any means. Now, ultimately, what this means for you with all of these data set and these points is that as a podcaster, you are entering the space now more than likely, or you're launching a show right now. Maybe you've been podcasting for a long time, but you're starting something new. You have to adapt to the here and now. You can't take the models that were made from generation 1 and 2 podcasters and try to apply them to your show. It's just not going to work. This whole episode is outlining the ways that things are changing, and you got to stick with the time and be current, because you just don't want to get locked in ye old times, right, SP?
Get off my lawn. Yeah, no, you don't want to be locked. You want to progress forward. You want to continue to grow, and you want to continue to optimize what is the highest percentage for you to grow your show. So how might you actually do this? How might you embrace this emerging trend change and get some growth out of it? So first of all, get yourself some social media presence. I mean, that's pretty obvious. We've talked about it before. You want to be out there where your potential audience members are, but you don't want to overextend yourself. So whatever you can actually keep track of, usually it's like 3 different social media sites is about all you can before you start pushing some others away. You want to maintain that presence at those places, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, whatever. Get yourself on social media and get yourself some accounts on social media.
And there's a really important note on that as well. You know, while you want to make sure that you're not just like an automated bot that's going to deter people, even if you're just kind of keeping it afloat, the thing is, if somebody goes and they want to try to reach out to you, at least it's another method that they can do that. Now, here's a little tidbit that's a firsthand experience on that. We've got the Facebook page, and we've talked on the show before how SP does not have Facebook because of many different reasons. Anyways, he doesn't have a Facebook account. He still gets notifications from our Facebook page because they email them to him. So that's a great example on how even if you're a lazy Facebooker and you're checking your email, someone sends you or writes a message on your wall, you might get an email about that. So might as well set it up.
Right. And maximize your domain. Yeah, that .com, .net, .org, .ca, whatever it is, through non-traditional ways. For example, don't treat your website with the mindset that your traffic is going to navigate it in the same manner it did 10 years ago. While some people will find you there, make it easier for them to find you on their preferred method. So make sure that your social media buttons are there. Make sure your podcast apps that you are on there, whether it's Overcast, Beyond Pod, Podcast Addict, the podcast app, Google Play Music, I don't care. Make sure those buttons are available so people can drive to their TuneIn. There's another big one. Make sure those buttons are available front and center so people can easily contact you, so people can easily find your podcast media content.
Now, the other thing that you really want to make sure that you're doing is just accepting the fact that people are lazy. If you go into all of your engagements with everybody accepting that they are lazy, this is going to help you in a whole bunch of different ways. SP talked about making sure your buttons are there, making sure you have your links. Well, think about that. What is that helping? Is that helping the person that is willing to go to the website and search every nook and cranny there? No, this is helping the person who just wants to be lazy. The same thing goes with the way you interact people. You don't want to go and post on Twitter 20 messages that people have to read through, because that would be taking a round peg and fitting it into a square hole. It would be completely, again, Twitter users, they want the 140 characters. So I'm not saying lazy, but I'm just saying they have an expectation. The same thing goes with Facebook is you don't want to treat it like Twitter. There's room on Facebook to have a lot of information, but you don't want to have too much. So accept the fact that people are lazy.
So where I work, it is largely email based. So I work in an email based organization. I don't work in a social app, whether that's a productivity app for an organization or through social media. So when I go out and I talk to my podcasting friends and they say, "Oh my gosh, you sent me a 4-sentence email, SP. I can't read that. Just send it to me in a quick tweet or something." I'm like, really? You don't have the attention for 4 sentences in an email? That is the era that you're living in. Those are your potential listeners. So you got to make it easy for them. Now, with all that said, there is still a place for website long form content. Like if you're doing an extensive review like we do on Better Podcasting, we write those articles like my headphones article, the studio monitoring headphones article. There's a lot of important information in there when you're considering what sort of headphones to actually get. And that is all detailed in that article. That would not fit in a tweet.
I got another one is geeks.link/Emily review. This was the review that we talked about last week on the show. Emily Prokop from the Story Behind Podcast did a wonderful review comparison of microphones. Well, the thing was with the size, we weren't going to have it take up the whole section on last week's show, but we wanted to encourage people to check it out. So we played a section and encouraged them to go to the website. So that was really maximizing our website and making sure that people could get that information. And if you had a chance to check it out, you will know that there is a whole list of accompanying time codes that Emily put together, a whole article on it. So that's a great use of how you embrace your website in a modern world. You're really just giving an extra for your podcast.
And talking about extras for the podcast, we actually put out there in our social media account, the Better Pod @BetterPod Twitter account, of a few examples from you, our listener, of what your preferences are in these areas. So, Stephen, why don't you take the first one?
All right, so we asked the question, what is your individual method for subscribing to a podcast? We gave the options of search in my podcast app, button/link on a directory, link on their website, and manual RSS entry. Now, we usually don't talk about the sample size we got on these polls, but I'm going to go ahead and mention them this time just to show that it wasn't just 10 people. We had 74 on this poll, and out of the 74 people, the search in my podcast app came up 81%, with button/link in directory being 5%, link on their website being 5%, and manual RSS entry beat those two out with 8%. So that's interesting because that shows, again, are people spending the time to go to your website, or are they going with the easiest, laziest method?
I barely do the manual RSS entry myself, and I only do that when I can't find the podcast I'm searching for in a podcast app. I will right-click that RSS feed button on whatever website it is, and I will throw it into the podcatcher, whether that's iTunes, now Apple Podcasts, or for me, I use Overcast. So if it's not an Overcast, that's how I get it in there. So the second poll that we asked was, how do you discover podcasts? And these were 4 different options again. First one was iTunes, Google Play, et cetera, et cetera. So you're talking about the big directories. The second was social media. The third was a search engine, so Google, Bing, et cetera. And the fourth was word of mouth /friends. The sample size from this was just a little bit smaller. It was at 53, but that's still pretty healthy for a Better Pod poll. And the one that won was social media with 40%, but word of mouth was close behind at 36%. So if you combine the two, social media and word of mouth, which some people replied to us and said basically the same thing, that's 76% gets it through word of mouth and social media. Which,
when you get back to that global web index stat that we talked about with people finding new brands, they're kind of similar. Now, in that study, it was 33% of internet users said word of mouth and 24% said social media. But let's be honest here, 33, 24, it's kind of in the same realm. And that's what we got with our Twitter poll. So that's really interesting and goes to show that if you like a show, you should talk about it because you might be helping that show get a new listener.
Yes, you should always say, go listen to Better Podcasting. Steven and SP are awesome. Yes, you should. Whatever your favorite podcast. Matter of fact, I just did it on Reddit and it wasn't Better Podcasting today.
The last poll that we had was pretty interesting. What it was we had said, if you want to contact a podcast you listen to, is your first instinct to try them through social media, contact information on a website, email, or method discussed in show? Now, this one here got 90 votes. So again, a decent sample. And with the least amount of votes, 8%, was contact information on the website. The second least was 12% with email. The runner-up was method discussed on show, which only got 16%, and the resounding answer was social media with 64%. Now, There is an important footnote with some of these, as we did ask them on Twitter. So obviously that's where the market is, that the people that we're polling. Now, we did also go and we did share it in a bunch of different places and tried to get people to come, even if they had a Twitter, to vote. And I personally, I noticed a couple times I would be posting on Facebook, I would see an influx of votes. So I think that kind of worked. Now, the thing that you want to remember is, even though obviously the people we're polling are geared a little bit more social media oriented, this is still a potential consumer base. And these polls weren't run very long. I think the longest one we had was like 5 days. Now, that is quite a few people with our little rickety-rackety show that we got with votes. And that shows that is a potential audience that you might want to embrace. And the trend is that people are not, at least these people are not checking out the website. Do you want to focus all of your energy towards something that these people that we've polled are not really checking out? Or do you want to balance your time and pay attention to the modern world as well as your website? Really find the best balance, the best bridge. And that's the important takeaway from all of this information.
Yeah, the websites are still important. We're not saying don't do a website. You should have a domain name, your hobbypodcast.com, .net, .org, .ca, whatever it is convenient for you to get. And don't forget to build your mobile friendly content. We've spoken about this before, but we gave you a lot of great information and a lot of examples of where the trends are going, and it's just going to get worse in terms of mobile consumption versus desktop consumption. I don't think we'll have desktop computers in just a few years. I mean, take a look at the Surface tablets, the iPads that are the iPad Pros. Mobile computing is going to increase, and you're going to get more desktop sort of functionality in smaller packages. So yes, mobile friendly everything is going to be where you should be at. So the internet has changed in a lot of ways, and you should change with it as a podcaster. Or if you're just starting out, think critically about all that information that is 5-10 years old.
Yes.
And see if you really want to implement it based on the fact that it's 5 or 10 years old.
We want to close on this note before we go into our download. How do you find yourself getting the best interaction? Please do get in touch with us through any of our methods. You can reach us at twitter.com/betterpod. You can find us at facebook.com/betterpodcasting or email podcast@betterpodcasting.com and tell us, where is your audience at?
Yep, I want to know where your audience is at. So actually, that's important. You should know. So let us know where it is.
All right, let's download.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting Download.
All right, the download, we mentioned it, and let's just go ahead and hope that this is the end for a while. Even if there's a big moment, I can't talk more about it, SP. It's just like, it's the same thing over and over. That's right. SoundCloud is again saved. We talked last week about the potential investors. Well, we are here as a advice podcast to tell you the latest information. And the reality is that SoundCloud has been saved. So what does this mean for you? If you are a person who is thinking about using SoundCloud, keep in mind this entire history over the last few years, including that they are in a very unknown state. So you might want to think about another option. If you are somebody who maybe is with SoundCloud now, what this tells you is you can breathe a little lighter for a little bit longer. It's still unknown, but you know that there's some money coming in right now, right, SP?
Yeah, so if you haven't been paying attention to current events, basically what happened is SoundCloud went into a meeting, I believe last Friday, and said, okay, we need some additional venture capital funding or we're going to have to close down. They didn't say when they'd have to close down, but they said we're going to have to close down. And there was a whole rigmarole over devaluation of the initial investors and what exactly was the platform going to look like. In the end, SoundCloud did accept, and they were offered, and they accepted $170 million in additional venture capital funding. And they made some structural changes internally as well. There was a new CEO that was brought in, and some senior executives switched around a little bit. And I don't want to get too far into that because I don't actually know how long they're going to be in the spots. This could have saved SoundCloud forever. I don't know. It might not have. It just might have given them a runway to a death spiral in the future. I can't prognosticate what's going on with that company. What I can tell you is in any of these press releases and news articles on SoundCloud over the last couple of months, not once, not one time have you ever heard them mention the term podcast. It was all about the music and the music industry. Never once did they mention podcast or podcast hosting. That is a big red flag. Now, it could mean a lot of things. It could be nothing. Could mean that SoundCloud is going to spin off their podcast hosting to somebody else. Who knows? Even an existing company could come in and take over the reins, change the pricing over, and just absorb all those RSS feeds. SoundCloud wants to make a go at it. They can make a go at it. don't know. And at this point in time, I really don't care, except for if I was starting a podcast, I will tell you I would not place my RSS feed on SoundCloud. I do realize that SoundCloud has a great YouTube-like structure for discoverability, largely for music stuff, and people have said it works for podcasts. Okay, it hasn't worked for me. I shut down my SoundCloud account personally, but it has worked for some people, and if it works for you, great. I just would not trust my RSS feed to SoundCloud because you never know when they're just going to disappear overnight. I would also back up my files, which I would do so with anybody. I mean, I do it and I host on Libsyn. Stephen, I know you back up your files and you self-host. So just backing up files is good practices. So I took a look at this news and I was like, okay, what does this really mean? I mean, where are we really at with SoundCloud? And I'm not a financial advisor. I don't play one on a podcast. This is just me playing around with a few numbers. So I took a look at Libsyn's annual report. They are actually a publicly traded company right now, and they have to do an annual 10K filing with the SEC. So in that 10K filing, they said at approximately, there was a $9 million company a year. That's all. That's it. $9 million a year. So they're not going to need $170 million in venture capital funding to stay afloat, first of all. Second of all, they don't have all that much money to really spend, and they're a very lean company. About a third of that $9 million goes to operating costs, which includes bandwidth. It's about $3.2 million, which is up from $2.1 million in 2015. Once again, this is the information that is publicly available in the SEC 10K report on liberated syndication. So in 2015, they had 22,000 shows. In 2016, they had 35,000 shows. So maybe some of that increase was because of the increase in number of shows. Well, SoundCloud at one point in time was the largest host provider for podcasts at about 45,000 shows. It is less than that now, and I can say that for sure because all of the podcast media hosts have been receiving SoundCloud refugees the last couple of months left and right. I mean, Libsyn said hundreds. I've heard dozens every week from other media hosts like Pinecast and Podbean. So people are leaving SoundCloud in droves. And so they don't have 45,000 RSS feeds anymore. I would guess that in 2017, 30 to 35,000, at least right now, would be a good number to use. And I'll be generous. I'll say 60% of those are actually paying customers because they do have a free plan, which you can throw 3 hours up there and then you can start your podcast that way. I don't recommend it, but it's something that you can actually go do. So I will be generous and say 60% of them, of the RSS feeds, are actually paying customers at the $15 level. So that comes out to $3.15 million. And if their operating expenses are anything like Libsyn, they're short, just barely, but they're short of Libsyn. So I, in my uninformed position, think that SoundCloud's podcast hosting is not sustainable in the business form that they have it right now. So just take that for what it is. I mean, if you really think that SoundCloud can make a go for it long term, good on you. I really appreciate you actually listening to this and understanding where you stand and moving on. If you're listening to me and going, yeah, that just doesn't sound right, so either go research it yourself and find out more information, or don't use SoundCloud. Get on somebody else. Anybody else really is preferable, in my opinion, to SoundCloud at this point in time, just because of the instability of the platform right now. So, Stephen, it's my SP financial advice, which is not an expert and shouldn't be taken as such, but I don't know. What do you think?
No, I love these stats that you did. I gotta say, I didn't expect to see it. I didn't expect to see this in the doc, and I loved when you put it in there. And I personally think that it does, you compare it to something like Libsyn, and it really does end up speaking volumes to what they need to do, and really the podcast sector of SoundCloud, because it's really easy for us as podcasters to all feed off of each other and speculate off of each other and assume that the information that's out there about SoundCloud is directly relevant to us as podcasters, but we are just a teeny piece of that SoundCloud pie. So it's really tough to say. I love your stats. Again, those are calculated speculation, 100% speculation. Do not take that as financial advice. And on that note, I, Stephen John Drew, make this commitment as we record this on Wednesday, August 16th, 2017, to say that next week's episode, we will not talk about SoundCloud unless there is one or two key things, i.e. the podcast division goes away or is announced to go away. Aside from that, we will not talk about SoundCloud next week.
If the podcast division spins off, will we talk about it?
We'll leave it for the week after.
Okay.
All right. I just thank you, SP. But let's go ahead and find out what the listeners had to say. This week, our first piece of Twitter feedback said, I love SoundCloud. No, I'm just joking on that. No, we actually got a pretty good iTunes review, right, SB?
We did. We were talking about those mobile apps and what they mean to your podcast. And we talked all about podcast reviews in the past few episodes. Well, we got another review on Apple iTunes, Apple Podcasts. You see, I'm so tongue twisted with this because I don't know what to call it. It's iTunes to me and probably always will. Well, it's in the Podcasts app. We'll just call it that on iOS. So the title of this review was Must Listen for All Podcasters. It was done by a guy, I'm assuming it's a guy, by the name of Bandrew Says. And he says, Better Podcasting is hosted by two of the most lovable, scruffy-looking nerf herders on planet Earth. That being said, the information they provide is extremely useful, not only for beginning podcasters, but for veteran podcasters as well. They cover topics from the correct microphones to use, to podcast preparation, to social media interaction. I have been podcasting for 3 years, and after every episode, I have at least one new tip or trick that I want to try to implement to try to improve my podcast. If you are a podcaster and you are not listening to Better Podcasting, then you're doing it wrong.
I think I know that person. He seems familiar. I don't know. It could be a different Bandrew, but it might be the Bandrew we had on this very show at one point as a guest.
Indeed, it is. It is Bandrew from Bandrew Says Podcast, also the Podcastage YouTube channel, which you can check out a lot of great podcast gear reviews.
Yeah, if you're into gear or into checking out different mics and stuff, you got to check out Podcastage. It is a great YouTube channel. We also did end up getting some Twitter feedback from Ben Reynolds, and he sent us a picture. His Twitter is bray9988. That's at bray9988, and it said live show was a hit, and it was a picture of what seems to be recording a live podcast. It looks like it's in a public situation from what I can see. It's a tight frame, but I'm guessing they recorded it in front of some people.
I would say so, and I will say, Ben, that I'm a little bit worried that it looks like there's bars in the background, like metal bars, like metal jail bar cell bars. So I just want to ask, Ben, is everything okay? I hope it is, because it looks like you may or may not have found yourself in custody.
You know, I was actually just reading an article that says that there is a prison podcast that is, no, legitimately, there is a prison podcast that apparently is doing very, very well.
Well, he got a lot of time. Might as well use it appropriately. It does look like they're having fun. They did ask us if there were any tips for a live show, and I gave them the few that I had. Make sure you have fun, and it looks like they were having fun because, well, their eyes are kind of crossed in the picture, so I think they are. And that's important. If you want to do a live show, there's a lot of prep that goes into it, but it looks like these guys had fun doing it. So congratulations, guys, for putting on a successful live show.
We also got a tweet from Christopher Long, the winner of the Audio Technica ATR 2100 that we gave away. We ended up giving one away, including a windscreen, because whenever we mentioned this microphone, we talk about how there is a bit of a plosives problem. And he sent us a picture of a package, and it said, "Look at my unintentional birthday present." And I guess it just showed up on his birthday. I had
no idea.
It totally purposely showed up on his birthday. It was totally intentional.
Indeed. So, Chris, in case you're listening, I hope you found the windscreen. I actually tucked it into the back of the packaging because I just didn't want to actually wrap it with the windscreen on top. So I hope you found the windscreen. He didn't show a picture of that, but it did look like he successfully received his winning gains from our giveaway. So congratulations, Chris, and have fun using that Audio Technica ATR 2100. There was also another tweet that we received from Christopher Nessie. He goes by @Mr. Nessie or MRNISI. And he said, "Love this podcast. If you're creating or thinking of creating a podcast, you must subscribe to Better Podcasting." Thank you very much, Chris. We really appreciate the shout out there.
He said, "Stephen Jondra is the greatest host in..." Oh, no, he didn't say that. Never mind.
No, that was implied, though.
Right.
Yeah. And then Heather Welch from New Zealand tweeted us, and she said, "The polls have been good fun to partake in. Interesting to see what's popular." Yeah, it is, isn't it? The polls are just fun, especially if it's a subject that you're interested in.
And we also got W. Scott Smith sending us a message, and he said, "Stephen and SP, I don't think I've ever heard a podcaster talk about the number of downloads their show receives. Because I've never heard it talked about, I've also never asked anyone. Is this sort of a personal thing? Perhaps considered rude, taboo, improper, or crude? Is there a way to determine the approximate number of average downloads per episode for someone's show? I'm trying to compare our downloads to other shows within our niche. This message will self-destruct in 10 seconds. Scott." That was 10 seconds ago, and it didn't destruct. You lied.
Well, Libsyn gives away those great monthly statistics, which tell you, at least last month, that 214 is the download numbers for the average podcast. So if you have 50% under, this is all podcasts that Libsyn hosts. So it's right smack dab in the middle, and it's the adjusted mean is what it is. So 214, if you're doing better than 214, you're doing better than half the shows out there. If you're not yet received 214 downloads per episode within 1 month, then you're not doing as well as half the podcasts out there. So that's a starting point. The other things that you can do, and it's not always indicative of performance, is look at social media accounts. How much engagement is there specifically on the show? How many subscribers are there at? You can go over to YouTube, see how many live views, see how much comments are on YouTube, and you can go to their Facebook page or Twitter page and see all the interaction, which may or may not be happening there. And you can also listen to the feedback. And nominally, a podcast is going to get somewhere between 3 and 5% of people actually commenting back and useful in actual feedback. So you can almost extrapolate what you think their numbers are, but you're never actually going to know that. It's a personal number indeed. The one pet peeve I do have is people that tell what their download numbers are, but they aggregate it to a single month. So they're not talking about per episode, because that's the stat that really matters. They're saying, I get 30,000 downloads a month, or I get 100,000 downloads a month. Yeah, well, you released 10,000 episodes. There's no way to tell how many they're actually getting per episode that way. So I wouldn't count on that either. If you hear a podcaster say, I get X amount of downloads per month, I don't care. How many downloads do you get per episode? That is what I care about. And you won't hear a lot of people talking about it. And definitely not in a niche. I mean, if you're trying to equate yourself to somebody else in the same niche, good luck. You might be able to get a hold of their media kit, which may or may not have that information on it.
The other thing that I'll mention with that is SP talked about how Libsyn puts out stats. I encourage you to check these out because this is going to help your BS meter. Okay. This is going to help it big time because there have been conversations that I have seen Stargate Pioneer engage with other people, and they throw out a number that clearly either they've got embellished numbers, they either have stats that aren't reliable, or they're just outright lying, because you look at all of the other information that Libsyn's putting out and you're like, wow, you have the #1 podcast in the world. And it's like, no, you don't. So it's really important to be in touch with that. The last piece of feedback that we've got comes from our friend Johnny Pennington, and we're going to go ahead and turn it over to our resident reader, Stargate Pioneer, to read.
Hey guys, not to complain or anything, well, perhaps a little, but I'd like to reference an email I sent you way back in March 26, 2017. Now, I cannot fault you for not responding, something you always do and that you actually did to my initial question, but your response was that you'd probably do a review in a few weeks. The observation I made was about Steven not wearing his usual homage to Princess Leia, large over-the-ear hair muffin-style headphones. In Steven's email reply to me, he said that he had gotten the Shure SE215 in-ear monitors. Great, I say. They sure look good. Now, what about their performance? Steven had said that he was not quite ready to make a call on them yet. I mean, he is the production guy in Better Podcasting, starring Stargate Pioneer, and he alone would know just how well they worked. He said that he might be able to make a call in a few weeks. Now, it's almost 5 months later. Well, almost 6 months since he started to wear them. And his podcast base, at least I am, is still waiting with a bated breath for that forthcoming review. Just saying, and still waiting for that review. Better Podcasting resident troll, Johnny Pennington.
Johnny, my friend. Johnny Pennington. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. I do sincerely appreciate it. So I indeed did buy several months ago. Well, actually, I was gifted back in March. The Shure SE215 in-ear monitors. If you do ever watch us on the YouTube side of things, you usually see them sticking in my ear. They're pretty straightforward. They're a pair of essentially advanced earbuds. That's what they come down to. Now, one of the things that I got to mention right off the bat, if you're looking for the monitoring quality that you get from a great pair of studio cans, you're not going to get it unless you spend a ridiculous amount of money comparing or getting custom in-ear monitors. It's just not going to happen, because the way in-ear monitors works are you're going to put pieces of foam or plastic in your ears. And if you've ever put one finger, this is a great way to see what I mean. You put one finger in an ear and you talk and you move it in and out. What you find is sometimes you're more bassy than others, because it just depends on how tight your suction essentially is in your ear, as gross as that sounds, or just where it's sitting. So you're never going to get that great of reference. Now, for me, I use my cans to edit. That's what I use. If I'm trying to balance audio, I use my cans. But I wanted to find something that essentially would give me like 70-80% of what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear if my kids were yelling in the background. I wanted to hear if one of my co-hosts are banging on their desk so I can write down an edit point. I wanted to be able to hear if I had excess line noise. I'm not using my in-ear monitors in order to balance the quality of sound or set bass, because as soon as I put on my headphones from my SE215s, it's apparent how much of that full range that I'm missing with my 215s. But they have been great. I have played with some other in-ear headphones before, just regular ones you get with your phone. I've played with ones that are, Monster Brand is one that I played with. And overall, I just found they didn't work because they didn't sit right. Now, the 215s are great. I do recommend them if you're using them in the same way that I do, where it's not going to be your source and your sole way that you are setting audio and mastering audio. What I do recommend them for is when you want to look good on camera and be able to hear a reasonable amount of stuff that's going on. And one of the reasons it works really well is because with the 215s, They do give you a little carrying case, which is nice because I've taken them. If you've ever watched the video side of things, when I've been on the road, I have been taking them with me the last couple of trips. They're easy to bring along, but they give you a variety of tips, different size tips, which some of them do give you. But what's nice is they give you a bunch of different types. So there are some that are foam. There are some that seem more silicone-y. There are some that you can buy separately, which I did buy separately, which actually look a little bit like a white cone. And so if you picture almost like multi-tiered ice cream cones, that's what they look like. Now, those I find they really distort the audio more because they are giving you a tight suction. But if I was in a situation that I really wanted to isolate the outside world and I didn't really care that much about the detail, I would probably lean towards using my SE215s with a very tight fit over my studio monitors, because the tight fit, when you get like a really tight fit in your ear canal, it does block out a lot of stuff. So they've been good to me. They're awesome. I continue to use them. The usual problems with anything that you're going to shove in your ear is after a while, they will start to bug you a little bit. Now, the 215s, I have, on average, I think on the Gonna Geek show, we go an hour and we ramble sometimes upwards a half hour. I haven't really had them bug me. The first couple of times I used them, yes, but since I got comfortable with them, I've had no real problems with them. So they've been really comfortable once I found the right tips. I will tell you that with my first episodes that I was using them for about the first month, I was actually switching them out on the fly sometimes in the shows. When I was on a full screen shot of Stargate Pioneer on this show, I'd sometimes be flipping them out because I had tried a new tip and I'm like, no, I really don't like these. So you really got to be prepared for that if you're going to get them. I will say that while they do bug your ear canal more than a pair of headphones, I don't miss the hotness of a good pair of headphones. I have this Shure SRH440s, which I found are less hot for me personally, my head size, than the Audio-Technica ATH-M 40Xs. So when I say that I don't miss the heat of the Shures, that says a lot because they are less hot than the Audio-Technicas. So they've been good to me. I'm going to continue using them. The only thing that I can find that is a bit of an irritant over a pair of headphones is that obviously, like earplugs, eventually I'm going to have to change out those tips. So it will be an added expense, but I have got compliments about dumping the headphones. So since I am okay to do it, they sound good to my ears. With my specific ear canals, they give me what I'm looking for, the majority of what I want. I'm happy to embrace them. So hopefully that helps you. Everybody has a different size head, which is why different headphones sound better for different people. Everybody has different ear canals. So while they work for me, be warned, they may not work for you, but I'm enjoying them.
So you mentioned that you're going to have to change out the tips after a while. If you wear these over-the-ear studio monitoring headphones, eventually the pads around the actual ear piece are going to wear out too, and you're going to need new ones of those. So it doesn't matter which one you get. You're going to have to either buy new or you're going to have to buy parts for what you got. Now, I have said this before, but if you're a new listener, I cannot wear in-ear anything without getting actual ear infections. I have some medical conditions and my ears just don't treat anything in the ear nicely. So I have to wear the over-the-ear studio monitors, and that's what Johnny Pennington was talking about, that only Steven would be able to review those in-ear monitors because I can't actually use them. I have to use the over-the-ear stuff. And you were saying that the Shures are less hot than the Audio-Technica ATH-M 40X, and that's true. Imagine an even hotter pair with the Sony MDR 7506s. Those can run even hotter if used over a while, just because they're older technology. They're great technology, but there's like 20, 30 years old. So my sympathy goes out to anybody that's working in a mixing studio and has to wear these things all day long, because there is just no good fit that I've found that you could really use them on your head for the entire day. And I use what I've got. I think they're a lot better than what I've had in the past. and I'm really appreciative of them, but nothing's perfect, basically. And good luck finding perfection, because if you find it, let us know.
Yeah, I didn't realize, though, how much of what I was feeling when I was recording was my headphones. So that's an interesting win that I didn't expect when I had first said I wanted these. The other quick note that I'll mention as well is, as far as I don't know, do you call it gain on headphones goes? I will say that I don't have to pump that much volume into the SE215s in order to drive them. I've got a little Behringer headphone monitor amplifier on there, and I go to about a third of the way up. So pretty decent, because I know with my 440s, I think I was putting them about that same level, if not a bit higher. So they've been pretty good for me, but everybody's a little bit different. It just depends on what you're trying to hear. Again, summary, not getting the details of a proper studio pair of headphones, but for recording, I'm loving them. So if you got questions about that, email us, get in touch with us, any of the ways that we've mentioned. Just go to betterpodcasting.com. You can post there or click through to our other social media. But that is going to go ahead and take us to the end of episode 93. Before we wrap up, we'll just tell you that we are part of the Gonna Geek Network. If you're into geeky things, check out the Gonna Geek Network, including the Starling Tribune, which is the Arrow podcast of the network. That show's going to come back soon, but while you're waiting, watch, because they're talking some other interesting topics. There's some guy on there named Star something or another. I don't know. So I don't know.
He goes by SP.
Okay.
And yeah, they talk Legends of Tomorrow, and they're getting ready for the 6th season of Arrow.
Awesome. So for episode 93 of Better Podcasting, I'm Stephen John Drew. What if I used one headphone and one in your monitor?
And I'm SP saying, make sure you make your podcast mobile friendly. We'll see you next time.
Stats. Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. We encourage you to check out all of the other geeky podcasts available at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This has been a Gonna Geek production. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.